Trump likes winners, and Ukraine recently has started winning. That was a NATO official explaining why we saw some pretty significant changes from the United States at the summit this past week. And honestly, it went way better than I thought it would. I mean, bottom line up front, this summit was good news for the United States, good news for NATO, and good news for Ukraine. In fact, I was fortunate to chat with President Zelenskyy for a few minutes, and we talked about you all, how important donations are to soldiers across the front, and why Ukraine is fighting so hard for their freedom. And we'll have those interview segments later in today's video. Now, the mood at this NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey was genuinely optimistic, and personally, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, I had joked in recent months as this invitation came together that maybe the United States wouldn't even be a part of NATO by the time we got there. And as soon as I was on the ground, people were asking, is Trump actually going to attend? I mean, we've definitely had some frustrations within the alliance in the last year. And unfortunately, Greenland was brought up right out the gate day one, which wasn't great. But it does seem, or at least my impression, was that our allies are much better prepared to deal with some of this stuff and kind of work through it and focus on the big picture. And big picture, of course, a major issue is continued support for Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, but they continue for the third or fourth year in a row be kind of center stage at this summit. Now, personally, I hope Ukraine is able to join NATO sometime soon. But whether you agree with that or not, support for Ukraine, I genuinely believe, is in our best interest and the best interest of the NATO alliance. And what I mean by that is the very pessimistic side of view is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We can just start there, right? Russia has been providing targeting assistance to Iran that killed American service members. Russia is an adversary of the United States. Ukraine is currently fighting and degrading the Russian military. So you can just stop there. Right? That's one. All the way on the other end, we've got the largest standing army in Europe with the most experience in modern war that wants to be on our team. They want to be a part of NATO. They want to fight on our side. Great. Like, we don't have to recruit them. This is an organization, an entity, and the know-how that we should want on our side. And hopefully, before too long, we'll actually get there. In fact, to that end, I was able to ask President Zelenskyy during a short session what he thinks the American people need to know about his country and the current war that they're fighting. And he really focused on the idea and the fact that they are fighting for freedom. For the American people. So I'm from the United States in Tennessee, and we've been back and forth.
I've never been to Tennessee.
Welcome to come to Nashville. It's great. Country music capital of the world. So we've been back and forth in the United States in terms of our support for Ukraine. What do you think the American people need to know about your country, your military, and the conflict right now?
First of all, we're thankful to American people. They have to know that we will not forget the beginning of the war when it was so important to stood with us. Yes, and choose the right side. This is really very important. Today, the American people have to know that, yes, we increased our technologies and we are one of the first in the world and the first in Europe on drone technology. But really, that Americans helped us at the very beginning, with intelligence, how to understand when the enemy uses ballistic missiles and etc. About huge attacks, and without intelligence of the United States, we couldn't work. Then the first Patriot systems we've got from Americans. It's true that also with Europeans, yes, but in any way, this is very important thing. And they have to know that American people live like mostly the world live in democratic, independent democratic country. And this is very important. And God bless that Americans now don't know the price of freedom. And of course, in the past, you paid a lot for this, of course. And now it was not our choice, but it was not our choice to fight. But it was our choice to defend. Yes, to defend, yes. And then that's why I think that Americans understand what does it mean to have to, we need freedom.
Yes.
We need, this, we need to have free choice, how we want to live and whom to love. This is important. This is a big difference between us and Russians. We want freedom. And that's why we fight for freedom. Russians, they don't want, because if they want, they have to fight internally against their Kremlin and etc. It's their choice. So this is big difference to value there's been, this freedom.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm thankful for all the support. And
Now, a theme I'm going to hit on a couple times here is that the overall tone of the summit was very different. It was optimistic. People felt like things were moving in the right direction, and across the board, I got the impression that NATO countries believe that Ukraine has the upper hand. Not just Ukraine, not just NATO members. In fact, we even got some of that from Russian commentators in recent days, but it all hinges on this idea that I think was summed up well in a Financial Times article talking about how Trump's surprise Ukraine shift steadies nervous NATO allies, where a NATO diplomat was quoted as saying, quote, "It's relatively simple. Trump likes winners, and Ukraine recently has started winning." They quoted Orisia Lutsevich, my apologies in the pronunciation, the deputy director of the Russia and Eurasia program at Chatham House, saying, quote, "Trump has been briefed that Ukraine is seizing the initiative in the war at the moment. It looks to him like Putin has rejected a good deal and is now in trouble due to Ukraine's upper hand in mid and long-range drone technology." And we saw this playing out during the actual summit. We've been talking about this on the channel for months now, where something has changed. The tone has shifted, and all of a sudden, Russia finds themselves unable to effectively defend against Ukrainian mid and long-range drone strikes. The tide genuinely seems to be turning in this war. Now, President Zelenskyy did meet with President Trump during the summit. It was like an hour and a half long meeting. They did a follow-up with the press. I wasn't able to attend that one, limited access, if you will. But Zelenskyy made a great comment, I think, during this, where President Trump asked, hey, maybe we can end up meeting in Moscow sometime, trying to resolve this conflict, which Zelenskyy said probably not super safe.
President Putin said, I would love to meet in Moscow. And I said, I don't think, I have to put myself in his position. I don't know that he'd go to Moscow. Maybe he would. Would you go to Moscow?
It's difficult. There are a lot of Ukrainian drones there. That's right. It's dangerous.
He doesn't want to be hit by a drone.
Europe.
No, it's hard. It's hard to go to Moscow.
I mean, I think that's probably one of the best sound clips we got out of the entire summit, for what it's worth. But look, in these conversations, there's up, down, and sideways anytime with Trump. And Trump did call Zelenskyy Putin a couple times, which isn't ideal, but nonetheless, the big outcome of this conversation between the two leaders was, in my opinion, the agreement that we will license Patriot production to Ukraine. Now, there's a lot of nuance here. All right, big picture, good news. And honestly, big picture, good news for everybody if there's ever anything that leads to more Patriot or air defense interceptor production. We're short those. The world is short those. There is not a single allied country around the world that is using Patriots, or the United States, that says, actually, we've got enough. Don't worry about it. Can you take some of these off our hands? So anything at all that increases production is a net win for the United States, for NATO, and then whatever country is producing those. In this case, it's Ukraine. The nuance is that takes a while to set up, takes a while to get going. In fact, Zelenskyy actually mentioned this in our brief interview, saying, between you and me.
And now we had the NATO summit, during NATO summit, we had a meeting with the President Trump, and now we have the decision. I hope that, God bless, we have the decision, the positive decision about licenses for Patriots. And so it's great news. Of course, between us, it will be great when it will be in Ukraine. Sure. Already we will see. But it's great news for us. It's a great decision. Hope President Trump will do it, what he accepted during our meeting. So God bless, we'll get it. Thanks.
There's also a bit of a question as to what this production license is actually going to include. Like, it's probably not the entirety of the Patriot system. It's probably interceptors, but even that, it doesn't sound like that has all been clarified quite yet. However, overall, net positive that this is even being discussed, let alone agreed upon. Again, a benefit not just for Ukraine and all of NATO, but the United States as well. Now, turning to some of the more formal responses, we had Zelenskyy published to Telegram just after the summit, quote, "Right now we have a window of opportunity. Ukraine has become stronger, both on the battlefield and in the air, and everyone can see the corresponding results. Putin, whether he knows it or not, but he certainly receives information and understands that he currently has no advantages. There's ballistic missile attacks, and there are truly tragic and terrible strikes against the civilian population of our country, but this is the only advantage he has left. He has nothing else, and everyone sees this. We've spoken with President Trump, and during the summit, I met with many different leaders, even the leaders of countries whom I had not previously met. Everyone notes one thing: Ukraine has become stronger." And love it or hate it, agree with it or disagree with the take, there is something to be said for wanting to get behind the winning side. I mean, I think pretty clearly that's playing to President Trump's calculus right now. We'll see if this actually plays out long term, but across the alliance, one member state after another, anytime they were in front of the press, anytime they were talking, echoed this comment. Ukraine has the upper hand. Russia is on their back foot. We need to do what we can right now to make sure this war is brought to a just end. Now, turning to the Russian response, not overly happy with how things played out here. I think they were kind of expecting that the NATO alliance still might fall apart, or that there'd be too much fracturing, too much disagreement for anything to play out here. That's not what happened. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov said, quote, "We will no longer believe the West when it claims to want negotiated solutions. This reserve of goodwill and hope has been completely exhausted." Two majors, a Russian mill blogger speaking to this, said, quote, "The meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy in Ankara on July 8th once again confirmed the truism. It is a dangerous illusion to expect that the White House will force Kyiv to accept Russia's conditions." Again, there was a longstanding sentiment inside of Russia, especially as Trump came into office, that he would pressure Ukraine into accepting Russian terms. And it looked like that for a while. I mean, we've kind of moved away from that. There hasn't been as much overt U.S. pressure on Ukraine in recent months, but the tide, or the Russian assessment based off of this summit is that the United States has effectively changed sides, and we are now firmly in Ukraine's corner. Fighter Bomber talked about this as well, another Russian mill blogger, kind of lamenting that they don't have anything like NATO. He says, quote, "One interesting moment was the actual return of the United States to the NATO fold after previous frictions with some of its members. The squabbling hasn't really gone away, but the U.S. has fully confirmed its membership as a military ally. Today, we can't respond to this in any meaningful way. No one will fight for us except ourselves. And all the military alliances we participate in are designed with the hope that we will fight for one of the members, not the other way around. Maybe if things get really bad, a couple of thousand brothers from Mali or North Korea will come, but otherwise we can only rely on ourselves." Again, I just want to hammer home how important and significant the NATO alliance is, that we have countries around the world that are willing and able to stand by our side in a conflict. Again, one of the key takeaways from all of this was that Article 5 is firm. That is the concept that an attack on one is an attack on all. And in the Ankara Declaration, the announcement put out after this summit, that was number one. They said, in fact, let's go directly to the Ankara statement here. They said, quote, "We reaffirm our ironclad commitment to our collective defense under Article 5 of the Washington Treaty and the Transatlantic Bond. An attack on one is an attack on all." That's really important, really significant, and really unique in world history that we have something like that. Russia, of course, recognizing they do not. The CSTO doesn't hold a flame to NATO. It never has, for what it's worth. That's nothing new. And it's not just that NATO supports NATO, but also that NATO reaffirmed their support for Ukraine, saying, quote, "Ukraine contributes to transatlantic security, and allies stand united in our unwavering support for Ukraine in defending its freedom, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. For 2026, NATO allies pledge 70 billion in military equipment, 70 billion euros in military equipment, assistance, and training for Ukraine, and affirm their sovereign commitments to sustaining at least equivalent levels in 2027. So that is NATO in Turkey confirming 140 billion euros in military aid to Ukraine over the coming 2 years. Now, Ukraine doesn't just have the support of NATO locked in now for the next 2 years, but also your support. People around the world chipping in whatever they can to support their military all along the front. And when given the opportunity to talk to President Zelenskyy, that was my first question. What does it mean that generous people from around the world dip into their pocketbooks and donate whatever they can every day, every week, every month? And here's what President Zelenskyy had to say about that. For those subscribers that are around the world, and every day, every week, every month, they're pulling out their wallets to donate for drones, for trucks, for things to help the soldiers. What could you share anything with them, just how much that means to the soldiers?
No, it's been a lot, because sometimes during the war people forget about soldiers. It's true, because people, it's shock when a lot of attacks on civilians and civilian people dying, children, and there's a big tragedy. But we forget. It's anytime, and we can't compare civilians so of course we don't, because soldiers is their job and they're heroic people, but they give their lives, and that's why I'm very thankful for. It's not about the volume of money, it's about the position to help support anybody what people can or what can. I mean, this is very important message and very important each day message. And when they try to support each day, so we are very thankful for this.
A lot of people around the world that care. Now, in wrapping up, there's a couple other key things I want to hit on here. I do want to stress it was not a perfect summit, not by a long shot. We're kind of grading this on a curve is the best way to put it. I mean, President Trump opened by talking about how we might move all of our troops out of Europe, how Greenland should be controlled by the United States, not Denmark, and how Spain is a terrible partner. That's not great, right? I'm more, tough love is maybe the most optimistic way to put it. I'm more in the camp of, can't we talk about this stuff behind closed doors? Because these public disputes, I'm concerned, affects the deterrence factor against Russia or any of our other adversaries. But the bar is pretty low, let's be honest. And I think overall, a lot of positive came out of this summit. Now, another interesting aspect here is the creator sentiment. So I was part of a NATO creator group that was invited to the summit. There were 27 individuals from around the alliance and a couple from Ukraine as well. This is very unofficial, but the general view that I got from them and talking with them is just exhaustion with the United States. They want us to succeed. They want us to be strong. They want us all to be good partners and work together. They're just a little bit tired. That, again, the opening of the summit is probably a good example. Trump showing up, talking about we might just take everyone out of Europe and we need Greenland. These creators, incredible people from around the world, they're just getting tired of kind of getting bashed by President Trump. They still, my impression is they still like the United States. They want to be good allies. They want us to work together, and they're looking forward to the next chapter. They're just a little bit exhausted. And you know what? I get it. But at the end of the day, across the entire summit, positive vibes, much more positive than the last time I was there in 2024. So that's all I have to compare it to. But that time was much more nervous, like what is coming. Russia at the time was pretty clearly advancing in Ukraine. It wasn't clear what the future of NATO support for Ukraine would look like. We were on the verge of a U.S. presidential election, and it wasn't clear who was going to be taking over. I mean, at that point, it seemed like President Trump was coming in, and any support for NATO, let alone for Ukraine, seemed to be waning. So in comparison, much more optimistic, much more positive, and I think we're going to see a lot more good things from NATO here in the near future. Now, quick fundraiser update. We've got a year-long campaign going with Car for Ukraine. 3 more vehicles delivered in the last week and a half or so. Incredible work. Vehicles 17, 18, and 19. Do you understand how impressive that is? You know, we're in July. We're just over halfway through the year, and you all have provided units with 19 total vehicles. These are units fighting in some of the hottest areas of the front. And because of you, they have transportation, they have logistics, they have medevac capabilities. So for those interested and able, or if you just want to learn more, that link to contribute will be in the description and pinned comment below. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.